Samuel, shall we start in a minute? We'll start now. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining for Lockdown Conversation number 8. My name is Rabindra Jhunjhunwala, and as a parent of two boys, 14 years old and 5-year-old, I personally thought this was a very important conversation to have had, especially considering where we find ourselves. Thank you very much for logging on and a very warm welcome. For those of you who have joined earlier, this is probably a repeat, but the pattern that we follow is having a conversation with our guest speaker for about 50 odd minutes, leaving the last 5-7 minutes for Q&A. And we have collected a lot of questions, and thank you very, very much for sharing them as part of the registration process. So a lot of the questions which have come, and some brilliant ones, will actually be part of the conversation itself. I'll weave that together. I mentioned this is the 8th of the series. The other 7 can be also found on YouTube, on the channel where it gets saved. This one will also get recorded and it will get saved. So I hope you're taking good care of yourself and adapting well to the new normal. These are unprecedented times and we have to think differently. So without further ado, I'm going to start, and a very, very warm welcome to you, Mrs. Anjali Karpe. Anjali is the deputy head and the head of student life at Bombay International School in Mumbai. We happen to know each other outside of school. My boys don't go to Bombay International. They go to Dhirubhai Ambani school, but Anjali's family and my family have been friends for several years now. So I thought, why not ask Anjali to take some time out and share her thoughts on this conversation. From what I know of Anjali, our speaker grew up in an army household. She traveled the country because of the frequent transfers the job required, absorbed different cultures. In the different posting, her parent found himself in different states, made new friends along the way, and adopted new systems. So all this, in a way, sort of influenced her in the way she saw the world. And from what I understand, her parents very boldly encouraged both her and her brother to follow their dreams. Anjali's experiences have all sort of added up to a range of diverse experience that find their way into the workplace today. Along with Anjali's leadership responsibility at her school, she is passionate about the subject she teaches, which is English literature and history. By the way, Anjali, I wasn't good at either of them. And she sees great joy in helping students discover their potential outside of the pure academic domain. And we are going to talk a little bit about that and why it is relevant. So give us a few minutes to get on and get to the questions. There would be a few questions which will be posted to all of you. And we're going to take a poll, take your answers and feedback and try and analyze that and use it as part of the conversation. So please participate and join the poll. So Anjali, before I move on to the questions, I wanted to ask you a couple of slightly personal questions because it would give a little perspective to what you have done and why this conversation today. Um, Obvious one, how did you come into the education space?
Uh, Thank you, Rabindra, for that very, very generous introduction. It made it actually seem more impressive than I see the space I'm in. And given given that I came into education rather accidentally, or should I say coincidentally, because it literally matched with my elder one joining uh, a preschool. And until then, I was pretty clear. I wanted to write. I also knew I wanted to write for children. So perhaps somewhere the connection with children was there. It just moved from having to impact them through what I wrote to a more direct working with them to leave an impact on them, working with them. So I actually stumbled into the space, but having stumbled into it, the decision to stay on was very conscious. It was very deliberate, and I embraced it very, very seriously. So yeah.
And for you, again, it's a personal question for you as a teacher and of course as a parent. Where do you think the maximum learning comes from?
Yeah, I think my greatest influences growing up were my parents. I mean, I think they left an impact in the decisions we made, and in the way we chose to drive our life. I also know that my formal qualifications came from excellent institutions in Delhi, Mumbai, and some of the very small places that we traveled to as a part of my father's army tenures. But I think the space where I'm in now, and the teaching space that I'm in, I think learning has come maximum from from my students in the classroom, from my own children at home. A look tells you whether what you're doing is right or not, whether it's interesting or not, whether it's engaging or not. And as I think as a teacher, I have literally tried to hone my skills of intuition when I see that what I'm doing brings value to children, and they show it very clearly and visibly. So you can't be fooled into assuming that you're doing something amazing in class. You can't fool yourself into telling yourself that your children are looking very happy with your decision, because they indicate it quite clearly. So picking up that advice, I think everything that I have done along the way, even what I do now, is because of what my children have indicated to me, school and home. So I also think that given that we are impacting their space, it is just important to understand them, work with them, learn from them, and I mean, I think both on the academic front, the subjects I teach, and my qualifications say student life, and that really encompasses all the areas beyond the four walls of the classroom. So I really do think that the holistic areas that I hope to impact are areas that do work with just students getting involved, understanding and absorbing what you do. And for me, I learn just from that, base everything on that.
Um, I mean, there's a reason why I asked this question, and perhaps during the conversation, the question will seem to suggest why, because I do believe, as you rightly said, you don't learn everything in school. There are some things which you learn outside of school. So, as a parent and as a student, I think there needs to be some there's some relevance for that too. Well, before I move on, I'm going to launch the first poll, and I'm guessing the answer. But let me put this up for all of you who have joined in. So, if you don't mind, the question really is whether the lockdown impact of education has been positive or negative. And since Anjali, since this is being streamed on Facebook and other platforms, unfortunately, the poll does not pop up there. So only those who have joined in Zoom will be able to respond. So the responses are only of those people who've joined currently. Lockdown impact of education, has it been positive or negative? And it is open for poll. Um, for now, I'll give it another minute. And while it is open, I would probably just say that, well, each one of us parent, and most of us who have joined today, I'm guessing parents would be going through this whole virtual learning, and every household is probably transformed into what I call a Corona Academy at home. At least for my kids, it is so. They come back after summer holidays. In a few days, they start school again, and that the COVID-19 has been a great leveler. There had been a lot of challenges which have come, and the whole imparting of education has changed. And Anjali, when we started discussing this topic, we did discuss about how there's a lot of reform which is needed, and it needs to be relooked. Um, and when we discussed, the national education policy hadn't been announced, so we will come to the education policy as well. Um, and perhaps some things COVID-19 has forced ourselves. I'm going to end the poll very quickly, put up the results, and then I'll get your thoughts on my initial comments. So, well, it's negative, 55%, and positive. So we'll come to it. Maybe we'll discuss some of the aspects. Maybe what positive learnings are there. Maybe we can discuss it later. So I'm going to stop sharing these results and move on with our discussion. So, as I was mentioning, Anjali, any quick thoughts in terms of what I just said?
Yeah, I think actually what's happening is the 45% that are saying it's positive, and I feel it's really a good base to start building on it, because given the situation, given that it's not going to change, I think we have to look at what is working for the people who have polled positive. And I think it is important to try and relook at the negative, because I just don't think it's an easy journey that anybody is navigating, but it doesn't even look like it's a journey that's going to end really very, very soon. So, given that, I would think it's nice to discuss this. It's nice to discuss what are the negatives, but also move those negatives to some positives at the end of this conversation, maybe.
Sure. And before I put up my second poll, I just wanted to ask you a pointed question about, do you think COVID has forced us to do things differently? And I'm talking education right now.
Um, I think there's been actually no choice, Rabindra. On the 13th of March, that's when our institution went into lockdown. I'm sure it was a question of just 1 week here or there that other schools went into lockdown. And I don't even think anybody fathomed what was coming up when we decided that we are going to close school. It appeared for a week, for a month, but the idea was it's all going to come back. We're going to get back soon. Nobody was willing to talk what the exams are going to look like or what the end of the term is going to look like, because there was just no comprehension of, of what exactly this lockdown was going to mean. And I think close to 5 months of that phase, it's pretty much clear that the things that we started scrambling to put in place in March will have to be slowly strengthened if we are to do anything meaningful with education. Otherwise, we can go on waiting for it to open, wait for the vaccine to happen, wait for us to get back to physical. That's not going to look like a realistic possibility anytime soon. And given that, there's no question of then losing out on time. So huge challenges for sure, but I think it is essential to really navigate this whole journey in a different manner altogether.
Sure. And as we speak, I have opened up the second poll. I hope it is visible on the screen. And the question which I'm asking is whether the lockdown has impacted education, and whether it has been positive or negative. Sorry, sorry, there's a second question. So whether online learning has been effective, my apologies. We'll just give a minute and a half for people to respond to that. But as we get the results in, the one thing which I wanted to sort of pause and mention, um, and remind people actually that perhaps all of us who are listening in, who have dialed in, are privileged, but there are others who aren't, and they face an uphill task of managing and seeking education during lockdown. As I mentioned, COVID has been a great leveler. So please do think about those who are not as privileged, who don't have the connectivity, who don't have a gadget. Um, and as part of what we are doing today, I'm going to end the poll here and share the results.
Can I just take it here, Ravindra? Because
Yes.
I do see that most people have actually said that it's effective. And I don't know whether it's very presumptuous to say that it probably goes a lot towards what institutions have been able to put in place, what teachers have been able to put in place, the way students have risen up to making it effective. At the end of the day, the impact is on them. And somewhere, clearly, parents feel that the impact on students has been effective. Having said that, I think if we go into the conversations a little further to probe what exactly is the teaching learning business about, what exactly is it meant to impact and change in student lives, it probably we might just come up with many interesting responses over there. But yes, I think you are right when you said a lot of these responses for effective online teaching would come from the privileged ones. For those who have struggled with with issues right from having a gadget available, I mean, where are we talking in terms of the online process being effective, right? So I think the question would be directed pretty much to those who would have the privilege of being the recipients of online learning. So I think time to be a little more thankful about what we really do have.
Absolutely. And as part of this lockdown conversation, since I have the attention of some people, what I wanted to mention is about a public charitable trust called Educo. And they partner with the municipal corporation, and they manage the Sai Baba Path School. If you have any old phones or devices, they would be very happy to take it for their students. So please do donate. There's a QR code on your screen. um, I will post the contact details as well on the chat, and I will send that separately as well. The founding trustee is Meenal Srinivasan, and they will be very happy to help you. So please do think of making a difference, sharing, giving away any old phones and devices that you have for those who are not as privileged as us. Thank you. Um, Anjali, I'm going to dive straight into the conversation now. And, what I've done is a lot of questions came in, very interesting ones. And since there are four dimensions to this whole topic, the institution, the teacher, the student, and the parent, I thought maybe we can spend some time on each of these pillars. I've tried to club in the questions which have come in, and trying to understand from you what it means from each of their perspective, and how it interweaves with each other. So if I may ask you my first question in this bucket, and I'm going to ask about institution. Uh, while you are responding to it, I am going to put up a poll as well, because I want to see people's reaction. But I don't want your answer to, I want your answer to be separate. So just generally, what we are seeing, this whole brick and mortar physical school, physical presence, the halo which an institution carried, that has sort of, how do I put it? It has gone away in a way, because you are in lockdown mode and you are in virtual learning. So where do we generally see ourselves when we think from from the institution's perspective? What sort of policy decisions are needed to be taken? What tone will it set? What sort of professional developments the institution needs to invest in, both for teachers and students? What policies will need to be reviewed, whether it is discipline, whether it is virtual policy. What shift will we see in terms of responsibility? How assessment is going to be done, screen time. So I'll leave you with some thoughts here, and if you want to pick up, however, there's no sequence, and I'll launch the poll in parallel.
Sure.
So your over to you, Anjali.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think you talked about the institution being the haloed place where you sought admission, and I think it is time for institutions to really gear up to understand what exactly they would like to do in terms of everything that they stand for. So when you talk of policy changes, this term that will begin for a lot of schools will not be about, the discipline policy that they followed for years. That's associated with the culture of that school almost. Uh, Everything will have to be reviewed because whatever was the normal during which time these policies got created has got completely reworked. So I may not even be able to see my students on screen because they have Wi-Fi issues. So there is no question of wondering whether they've got their hair neatly combed or not, whether they have worn shoes that are polished or not. I mean, those are part of the discipline policy of
Sure.
most schools. And the fact is that all those are redundant now. Um, the fact that teachers are struggling to figure out how to even gather attendance because now you're in, now you're out. Is the teacher going to keep track of students who've entered her class in a Zoom through a Zoom link? When did the child go out? If the child is off video, is the child actually floating around the room doing somersaults, or is the child listening to me? When I'm lecturing, I mean, schools have to consciously develop now a policy which students will have to adhere to. And, because of this, and I can see the poll as it is coming up, do you see the institution playing an active part in my child's life? That yes is almost like an imperative to schools to make sure that they do rework things to make their presence meaningful. And I think those policies are going to be pretty significant to define the culture of the institution here on. So you're right. How important will syllabus completion be for a school? Now, connected to syllabus completion, what are they going to do to make sure that teachers are empowered to deliver a curriculum that is that may or may not be effective in the virtual? It was very effective in the physical. What happens in the virtual? Maybe teachers need to be trained and skilled. And there has to be very little variability because a student cannot go into a math class thinking, I know how this is going to work. Whereas the English teacher decides that she's just going to do something completely randomly different. So empowering teachers, professional development of a different kind altogether will have to come into play if institutions have to make their teaching and learning effective. As far as allocation of time goes, I mean, there is a whole issue of how much Zoom time is good online. How do we actually end up making it effective? Children from 9 to 4 on Zoom, it's not going to work. So we will have to work into synchronous and asynchronous planning of classes. Schools are talking of how exactly to make learning effective, even if they don't see this, their children. I think on the other front is the school's ability to handle the social disconnect that has just been inevitable. What is the school going to do in terms of its physical education program? What's going to happen with the co-curricular space? What's going to happen with student leadership? I mean, institutions today have to take these decisions, Ravindra. It is really not something that can even emerge out of individual homes. And I see that is the reason perhaps why so many see the institution playing such an active part in the child's life. So yes, the institution has to now gear up to deliver this, right? And it certainly cannot keep doing what it was doing for the last many years of its existence. So
clearly, and if you see the poll results, I mean, 97% said yes. All the more reason that the institution needs to step up and do something. So I'm going to ask you a few pointed questions, and I'm seeing the list of questions which have come up, and there were tons of them. So I'm sorry I won't be able to take all of them, but I'll definitely take a few. Uh, this whole online versus offline virtual learning, is this the future? Where do you see it?
So I think, Ravindra, we have to really look very consciously as to what exactly virtual learning is doing for our children. I just think that virtual learning has strengths that were never available to us in the physical. And if there are issues that virtual learning is throwing up, we have to address those issues. And I think teachers are wondering how to engage their students. In a physical class, I knew exactly when my student was bored. I knew exactly when my student was disconnected from what I was teaching. And that's not the case now. I know that you're going to eventually move on to teachers, but I think the need for teachers to just go into an overdrive to reinvent themselves has been mammoth. I think it's just simply, inhuman in terms of the expectation, really, because it's really not been easy when teachers are told, okay, scenarios changed. From tomorrow onwards, you are going to be effective, but in a domain that's completely different from what it is today. So definitely virtual learning will have to be planned in a way that is effective, address the issues that are coming up as problem areas.
So I will get to the teachers, as you rightly mentioned, and I think we aren't seeing it from the teacher's perspective, and I have a particular view which I'll come to it. But the obvious question, everybody seems to be talking about it, the cost of education. Is there a reduction of fees? I'm not going to ask you that question. I am going to ask you slightly differently. Has anyone looked at it from a teacher's perspective? Has anyone discussed or has asked, for what they are doing, the evolving that you mentioned? Have we looked at paying them more at this stage? Is it not fair to do that as well?
I think, Ravinder, you've touched a subject which is been at the heart of discussion. It has been at the heart of so much of litigation that's also come about because of that. And I think it's just a time that is so challenging because where is the money going to come from? Whether it's the money to pay fees, whether it's money that teachers have to be paid as salaries, it's all intertwined, it's interconnected, and it is rough. Uh, I'm sure, I'm sure each one of us knows parents who might be in a spot to pay fees. And we are talking here of the privileged ones who go to schools that charge those maximum amounts, right? So, what is it going to be like for those parents? What is it going to be like for a teacher to to be told that your salary may not come because we're not picking up fees? So it's a chicken and egg story, and I don't think there are easy answers, but I do think that there has to be some level of empathy on several fronts. I think the institution might need to exercise need based cases. I think I think teachers will have to have their home fires burning. How else do they continue with anything? So I think those problems are something that institutions will have to find
Address.
solutions to, along with whatever the government is trying to bring about.
Sure. And we'll get to the government and teachers separately. I have a couple of more pointed questions when we're talking about institution. And I'm going to move to very quickly assessment. How do schools and colleges, educations, institutions plan to assess the entire, learning and achievement during this whole virtual class? Your thoughts?
Yeah. I think, for me, actually, when the whole thing started, what was really a bit troubling was every sort of webinar I attended, or even where I was called in to opine, the big thing was, what are we going to do with exams? What are we going to do with tests? And I just thought that somewhere our education system had got totally pinned into assessments and
Yeah.
examination, right? And maybe this was almost like a clarion call to address that. I think the first thing that happened, at least for those whose children are in Cambridge or IB schools, both the Cambridge and the IB called off their board exams, right? One fine day you were slogging, waiting for this big, ugly exam to get over, and then boof, it was gone. And it was almost like this, amorphous thing that just disappeared. I mean, actually, students didn't know what to do with themselves after that, because everything was so geared up towards answering an exam that there was nothing better that they could do once the exam was called off. But I think that in itself tells you that both these boards found a way to assess these children, right? These are children who are going to now apply to universities with a very, very different parameter of being given the grade. And I think it's probably the best time that all of us educators sat down to understand what exactly assessment can be about, how it can be effective as a measure of a child's learning and not the enormous stress that is associated with it. How can we make it effective so that such that it tests students' skills of thinking and the typical 21st century skills, problem solving, rather than adhering to a format, adhering to a system that can be cracked and those grades achieved. I think it is a wake up call. I mean, we've been talking reforms in education for ages. The national education policy is in the making for that very reason. And all of a sudden, we've been told, it's such a shake up that if we don't use this opportunity now to review what assessments can do and what exams are about, I really think we would have lost a mammoth opportunity in the journey of education itself. So,
Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question before I move to the teachers, and I know I'm spending probably more time than I should. Uh, how will it impact the curriculum? There was something which is required to be done during a academic year. You think we'll be able to squeeze everything in that academic year um, while we are learning virtually, or will there be a gap between what we are supposed to do and what we're supposed to learn? Very, very quick thoughts before I move to the next section.
sure. And I think that's a great question, Ravindra, and it's at the heart, and it should be at the heart of all teacher planning. What exactly is going to be the way forward to this? I think we have to engage with our students. They will have to learn and take this journey differently. They will have to take on far greater responsibility in the learning process. So it's not about the teacher responsible for completing a syllabus. It's not about the teacher responsible for finishing what the curriculum mandates, but the student has to come on board. We're not going to be able to do this otherwise. And I think it's a fabulous opportunity yet again. It's going to actually change the traffic of learning from just purely teacher to student to meeting each other halfway and see what we can do with ensuring that the learning does not slip through the gaps.
So the balance is tilting from the teacher to the student, and perhaps there's some good in it, but there's a role which needs to be played by the teacher, by the parent and the student as well, and we'll come to it. Did you have some thought? Because I thought.
Yeah, no, what I wanted to say was I think most forward-thinking schools were already in that mode, right? They were not talking about the teacher being the pure dispenser of information. I think they were talking, I mean, all of us have been engaged with institutions that have been fabulous, who have turned around towards a student-centric approach to learning and education itself. I think this will have to just ramp up.
Sure.
It'll have to go through another kind of overdrive to make it peak into being meaningful in this period.
Sure. I went to a Jesuit school and I went very long back, so it was very different at that point of time.
Yeah.
Um, uh, if I shift gear
Yeah.
to the next pillar, teachers.
Yeah.
And of course, we are ever thankful to our teachers. We are what we are because of them. But sometimes I feel perhaps we aren't as appreciative of them, especially during virtual and online classes. I if you don't mind spending a minute and a half on telling us how the teacher has got distanced and how it has changed from their perspective, and what the lockdown means for them.
Okay, you've given me a minute, Ravinder, so I'm going to rush through this because I can take at least a day to explain what teachers went through in this situation. But I mean, the teacher is seen as the expert, and the teacher did have that subject domain knowledge and expertise that students depended on, looked up to. Now, obviously, that was based on a certain position of delivery. That was the physical. So, as I said, everything changed overnight. And I mean, frankly, we just didn't give teachers time, right? So, here we told them, okay, sail your boat, but the boat has a little hole in it. So, while you're sailing, remember you to keep bailing the water out. You've got to reset the direction because the boat, while you're bailing it out, can change direction. So make sure you are actually redirecting the course. Make sure that the hole is plugged in as well. So it's not only about bailing, plugging in the hole, bailing the water, redirecting the course. I mean, I'm just thinking of that as almost like an analogy for what teachers were doing. Another very very special colleague said it was like trying to fix an airplane in mid-flight. That's what teachers were doing. So I mean, yeah, just don't crash it because you've got the responsibility of all those passengers on board. It's the same thing, right? So I think teachers also, while they are struggling, are forced to ask questions of themselves. Essentially, how can I make this better? How can I improve? Because students have access to a machine, and I think it was Arthur C. Clarke who said, if a teacher can be replaced by a machine, well, she should be replaced. So if we are at that risk, we definitely don't have a choice but to engage differently with our students. So we've got to learn because we are trying to we are trying to make it work the best for them. And I think we'll all, as teachers, because I do teach, I think we have to be humble in realizing suddenly that we may not know it all. In fact, not being in that position allows us to learn and not be complacent about the fact that I did my B.Ed, I did my masters, and I really do know a lot. I think that humility is what will keep us going into improving. Um, I also think we must learn, in fact, to step back. And I'll talk about it a little more when we come to students, because when a teacher steps back, she allows a student to step up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what students are looking for as well. And very honestly, I think students see the effort that's going into what the teacher is doing. Um, and I think we've used the word pedagogy again and again. You'll hear it in professional development circles, you'll hear it in school conversations. But I mean, I just think that it becomes so important because our role now is to actually not complete the syllabus. That will happen. It is about teaching children how to think about dealing with a situation that they are not prepared for.
Sure. No, I think as a lawyer in my field and in my office, the two things where I draw an analogy to what you just said. One is you said machine learning and how that is becoming common. We are talking of artificial intelligence in our legal field as well, where we require to adopt it. But the other thing that we are also talking about it during lockdown is how the worst impacted and affected, according to me, are the young lawyers who are not able to learn by observing their seniors. And I think learning on the job is just so important. So, anyways, this is about a different kind of education. So, I'm going to come to the third pillar, students. And I know that some students are participating on this call, and there are of course a lot of parents there. So a lot of what you say about this will impact the parents as well. And you did allude to the fact that, while assessment, it may not just be about marks, and it may be a little more. Of course, there's an integrity angle which comes in because it's virtual learning, and the assessment is going to be in a different manner. There's a test of character building. So I'm going to skip that and ask you a little bit about emotional well-being, because this is something which, as part of the lockdown conversation, I had done on mental health, and the mental health for the kid, students, young, is also important. So, your quick thoughts on mental health and anxiety and well-being of students, also to an extent parents. Um, are institutions supposed to be doing something? How are they fixing the situation they find themselves in?
So, Rabindra, it's very interesting, but I mean, at least that's probably my limited experience, but I did feel that schools, even pre-COVID, uh, gave, I mean, it's not, I won't say they didn't give its due importance, but I just felt that we take for granted that children will be happy. We take for granted that everything is well unless the child has a breakdown. Very often when it's breakdown, it's things have gone so bad that fixing them is really an issue. But I think the whole socio-emotional well-being space has taken a completely new turn with COVID. And I think, somewhere I've come out admiring students as much as I have admired teachers who have rallied, because for students, two things changed overnight, right? And if you ask any of them, their biggest joy, what are they looking forward to? Meeting friends,
Yeah,
going out and playing with friends. One fine day, we told them, sit in the house.
yeah,
There's no question. Can I go to the neighbor? No, you can't. This is the barrier, the Lakshman Rekha. You cross it, you are in deep Ravan land, and you're never going to be excused for stepping that. We demanded things out of them that were almost you know everything that could go against what the child would need, what the child would desire. And I think I think socio emotional well being will just have to be addressed. If it's not been addressed by institutions in the last 5 months, it should be priority number one. And I think schools will have to make time for this, because we are assuming that all children are dealing with this very happily because we are providing them with the essentials at home. And it's not so. I think student minds are working very differently. They have never known such a dystopian time before. Things were very happy. Sundays were meant for going to PVR and watching a movie with parents and then eating out. Today, it's like, okay, I'll get you popcorn if you want. Okay. That's about it. And that's where it's going to end the PVR experience, in the confines of a bedroom. I think children have really shown resilience. I mean, the word resilience is being again one of the words that's going around.
yeah.
But for a child to actually wire himself, herself differently at all ages, you find children have just adapted, right? And because of that, I think all of us will just have to spend time on socio-emotional well-being. It can no longer be taken for granted. And I think even as schools, we have reached out to our counselors to say, do something actively. Don't wait for that one student who comes to you to say, okay, I'm feeling really bothered about things, right?
Sure.
It isn't about that. We have to be able to bring in practices or routines that make children calmer, more relaxed, more acceptable to what's happening in the world around. Sorry, I think I've gone longer than I should, but yes,
No, thank you very much. And
yes.
one question which has come up a number of times is this excessive screen time. How much is good enough? Is there a digital detox needed? Um, I wanted your quick thoughts on this. I'm sure tons of people have spoken on it, but it's a question which has come from a number of people that I see. And some schools, I'm told, that are only doing course material and knocking off extracurricular to reduce screen time. I don't know what is right and what is wrong, um, but what has been the impact on young minds, especially young kids, as against the older ones while in virtual school? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think firstly there are two aspects to this issue, Ravindra. It is one is how are schools going to fit this in. The other bigger one is how have those co-curricular uh, you know uh, facilitators manage to reinvent themselves. Because if we are talking about reinventing the academic delivery, the reworking that a drama teacher or a music teacher has had to do is just beyond the scope of even understanding of how this can be. How does one teach drama or music in the virtual mode? But I think those who have been passionate about it have actually been able to find a way around it. I also think institutions just need to give these people a chance to make this work. Because without this, I mean, even education that we talk about is just not about only academic education. So, somewhere we will have to understand that education is about that debate that is very, very important for the child to learn to argue respectfully and effectively. That a performance of any kind is important for self confidence and, and building the self worth of a child. That children could be possibly not even good at academics, but could be good at dance and music, and they will have to flourish. And we'll have to make sure that we allow for this within the school timetable. It cannot be that, okay, we are done with finishing the math and the English and the Hindi curriculum. Now school is over. Now you go deal with a ballet teacher who can come and teach you some ballet, or your violin teacher. I think as schools and institutions, we'll have to bring these in because they will become the breaks. Yes, they will have to happen online, Ravindra. And as of today, I don't see an alternative to that. So let's hang on to them, just like we are hanging on to the virtual space and the online mode for academics, in the same way for these activities as well.
Okay. I'm going to ask a quick question because this impacts a lot of my friends. I'm of that vintage where a number of kids are either in overseas doing their post grad degree, or they are on their way there. Of course, I married late, so my boys are a bit younger. But this whole gap year theory, I wanted to test with you, understand what is going to be the impact for those kids who are either applying to colleges this year or a couple of years, or who are already there. Just your very quick thoughts and your idea about, is it a good time to just take a year off and do something? Are we ready?
I mean, that's yet another question, right? That's been uppermost on so many conversations. I honestly will not really be the soothsayer here to say this is ideal or this is better. I just think these are decisions which have impacted homes, parents, students, even the institutions of higher learning. I don't think any one decision can be right or another one wrong. I know this is a horribly vague diplomatic answer, but I
No,
genuinely
I appreciate it. I may have not asked the ask. I mean, perhaps it should be responded to by a counselor, but I thought maybe I will just pose it since.
No, I'm just coming from the space where I've heard decisions going either way. I've had
Oh,
parents coming and saying, "Gap year is it?" I have another set of parents who say, "You know what? I'm not taking a chance with a gap year. My child's going. I'll take a chance with COVID, but not with a gap year." So I think these are big decisions for homes
yeah.
and parents and students to make.
Sure. I'm going to run my last poll,
Mhm.
which will bring us to the last of the pillars, the parent. And the question really that I'm asking, especially for the benefit of those who can't see the poll, there are a number of people on Facebook and other platform. Parental role, has that changed? And is that something that you're happy about? Um, yes, you're happy, or no, you're not. And please don't be diplomatic when you answer it. Please be truthful. I'll give another 30 seconds. And then I'm going to ask you a question about the parents and their role. how it is a partnership with the teachers today, and how they need to step up and become an active participant. Um, how they will. So I'm going to end this poll and show the results. Uh, so, well, 71% seem to say that they feel happy about it. Um, so I'm going to leave you to answer that question.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad. I also think it acknowledges pretty much that the role has changed. I just think that if parents have seen it positively, then
Very
well,
good.
COVID has done well, right? If you have been happy about the impact of this on the child. So, I think today more than ever before, the school, uh, and I count the teachers as part of the school, and parents have come together to make sure that things work well for students. It cannot happen, especially with the younger children. Parents are pretty much there because children are not going to be left to handle their gadgets. It has meant enormous reworking of time for parents, a time when they could leave students at school and come away and get on with their work has changed completely, right? Children are there, right there when you're in the middle of your business meeting. Very often there's a dog yapping or a child bawling, and that's very much a part of that parental space. And again, just like every other space connected with education, I think parents have just risen up to realize that their engagement with their children has got changed. Um, I just think, and I know that those who polled positive have already seen some bit that is different from what it was pre-COVID. So my thing is, parents have been an important part of this of this journey,
Yeah.
and they'll have to hold on to this. Uh, I think it's been something amazing understanding your child, because you're seeing the child so much more than you would have ever imagined. So hold on to that. Try and get to understand your child. Uh, have lots of conversations. Use this time, because once physical school starts, remember, your child's back again into another space away from you. So use this time to have conversations, have make sure that they will be able to understand their children far better after COVID is over. So make sure that these conversations excite them. Make sure that you get down to their level of being able to figure out what's best for them. Uh, don't lose this opportunity. It will not come back. So uh, it is not going to be easy. You are going to continue with your dog yapping and your child crying while you are in the thick of a business meeting.
And don't forget the boss.
No, yes, absolutely. And everything, all codes have changed. But I do feel that if you have polled positive for that, this is your opportunity as well to almost redefine your relationships with your children.
Very true. You spoke of some positives, and I'm going to ask you the question about the positive impact of lockdown. And if I remember correctly, there was I think more in favor of positive
Yes.
than though marginally, but it leaned towards positive. So some other positives that you have seen as a educationist, just very quickly. So
Yeah. So, Ravindra, I think what happened strangely was that COVID affected everybody, right? Everybody. If it was lockdown, it wasn't just the people in Dharavi who were in lockdown. People in every area of the city, the country, the world just went into lockdown. COVID was a leveler like no other.
yeah,
We haven't had any phenomenon that made us realize that, okay, my situation is not very different from the situation of so many millions across all over. And I think it was also the perfect time to be able to have to get visibility of areas that were totally zoned out for especially the privileged children. Conversations on TV, conversations on the dinner table were about things that were not going well. And I think that automatically kick-started a sense that could not have been induced in the classroom earlier. I had conversations about how to give back. What can we do?
Yeah.
Parents began those conversations, pulled children into it, and willy-nilly the kids came and became part of this. And if you have conversations with children who have gone through that process, today you'll be able to have conversations that are very mature and very adult conversations about giving back. Community service that was a mandated tick on a checkbox all this time suddenly got reworked. I do believe that for this, the last 5 years or more, empathy, compassion are things that we really did need to teach. And COVID managed to teach those to children. So service learning went through a space, like an overdrive, like no other. And we didn't have to do anything about it. I mean, all you needed to do was stand and encourage children to take on the mantle of making a difference, and it happened. The other funny thing was that bullying stopped. There was no physical interaction, right? No slimy word that was getting passed down, no nudging that happened that indicated to the bullied child that things were not okay. uh, uh, Suddenly I had quiet children who could talk because there was no fear
Brilliant.
of facing an audience, right? They were in the confines of their room, the comfort of their home. Their parents would be somewhere around within shouting distance. This child who was underconfident and demotivated was suddenly liberated with just having to engage with the screen and zap out everything else. And I think I think that was immense. I know that the other word that has been again bandied about a lot is student agency, and I know that we are running short of time, but having students take on a greater responsibility for their learning to drive their learning and understanding was just immense. I mean, there's no way that we are going to not develop student agency now. We should not, because we should make our children more and more self reliant on being able to understand a problem, crack a problem, find solutions, especially when they are stuck. So,
Right.
there's going to be no way that a student can say, Miss, can you please solve this problem? I think students will have to learn to say, hey, I have to solve this problem by myself. Yeah. So I think I think the positives have far outweighed any of the terrible things that COVID has done. So I remain an optimist.
No, I totally agree. And I like to tell this story to everyone. Uh, I think apart from me in my household, my older one, because the younger one is only 5, the older one, I think both of us understood the difference between charity and kindness. And that's another story to tell. But I was involved in a social initiative, and very clearly, my older one was very affected by it, and he participated, which I thought was just a fabulous character building
Yeah,
exercise. So
absolutely.
no, thank you. I totally agree with you. I believe there are more positives, and I agree with what you said about looking at the glass half full
Yes.
rather than looking at it half empty.
Yeah.
Uh, I am going to get your very quick thought on the new education policy. I know this is a topic which can take a session and two, but just a very quick thought on what this whole NEP is and where do you see it go, and is did we need the NEP? Very very quick and basic. I mean, I don't want to put you in a spot here.
Yeah, no, no. It is going to be very brief and basic because the policy itself is huge. It attempts to tackle issues that are gargantuan. It's not going to be an easy talk. I think it's very, very ambitious. I think it's very well intentioned, but between the intent and the implementation, like so many people have said, is going to be the real test for the policy. I also think that it the implementation of this policy, the actual execution of this policy needs a fair bit of funding. And that funding is something that will have to be thought about, catered for, because if we are talking about massive changes like teacher training, we are talking about infrastructure creation, we are talking about the putting in place of a curriculum that works with the multidisciplinary areas that are being spoken about, the holistic development that is being spoken about. I mean, the investment is going to be huge. So I hope that there can be a substantial amount of the GDP that can be allocated for it. But I think the areas that it covers, I mean, I was actually very fortunate in listening to Professor Kasturi Rangan when he did a kind of a a preview of this policy some many months ago, and even at that time we were blown by the enormity of what was being suggested. So yes, I know that we are short on time, Rabindra, and I really do think that it's a topic by itself. And lots to discuss on that front as well. But I would like to leave with feeling again that it's positive. But just very quickly, since I'm on it, I think that we don't need policies to bring about reforms in education. I mean, things like the RTE happened without the education policy being rolled out. I think things like the revamp in curriculums like the CBSE went through happened without a revamp in the policy, right? So I think the national education policy is almost like this big, huge mammoth building that is being constructed. But within that, the smaller areas are being slowly dealt with, and hence again remain that optimist that things will be for the better.
As we all do. I'm going to just remind everyone about the initiative which I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that, well, we are privileged. There are others out there who may not be as privileged. So if you have any gadget to donate, whether it's an old phone or a device, please use the time, give it away. And we have Educo who will be very happy to pick it up from you. The QR code will get you to their website, and all the details are there. The founding trustee, Meenal Srinivasan, will do what is needed. Even if a few come out of this conversation, at least, I'll be thrilled. Anjali, before we go away, and I know we are at the hour now, I think there is a video which we wanted to play. So let's play the video, and then I'm going to ask you for your thoughts about the video. This is, for everybody's benefit. It is from a Ken Robinson talk. Um, it's on the screen now. If we can play it, please. Thank you. Anjali, your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Rabindra. It was a video that actually I'd seen quite some time back. So why would I show it here, right? And I think it's about just being completely positive about the strange, confined state that we find ourselves in, the very helpless state that we find ourselves in, the fact that we probably don't see solutions. And I do think that if we use all the resources we have at hand, we pool in all the resources, it's really not rocket science to find solutions as well. So there's the water that's going to help pull the peanut up the tube. Right now, the table's fixed, the tube is fixed. There's nothing that you can do to get that peanut out. But if we pool in the resources that schools have to offer, teachers have to offer, parents have to offer, and students get going with it, together it can be very, very metaphorically, the peanut rising can be about learning and teaching rising up as well. So I don't know whether, the idea was to say, oh, the ape got it and man could not. Well, that really wasn't it. But I think it was the solution is simple, and we'll have to understand it for that. I just think we'll have to look more at the triumphs than at the challenges that lie ahead. I
Sure.
think we'll have to start believing that COVID is a catalyst that will induce changes that were positive, that that have made us all rethink, perhaps reboot our thinking. Maybe just find moments that will get us more excited about what we believe in as parents, as educators, because at the end of the day, I think both parents and educators are striving for the same thing. And I think whether we see there a finite time to this journey or otherwise, I think that the end will be with something gained rather than something lost.
So
Yeah,
stay optimistic. Look at the positive. Look at the glass half, not half empty, but half full.
yeah,
Use the opportunity. Um, there are positives in virtual school. Understand the value of assessment. It's not just about getting your grades, but it's about learning. Resilience is what is going to be important. Again, stay optimistic. Um, Keeping kids out of school will do more harm, and you can't just blank out. So, virtual education is very important. Anjali, thank you so much for taking the time out and sharing your wisdom. I'm going away very happy, and as a parent, extremely thankful. Thank you so much. More strength to you and the other educationists. I know there are a number of teachers on the call, so thank you to them too for what you do. I'm sorry if some of the questions were not picked up and we weren't able to answer, but we tried to cover as much of it as possible. Um, that's sort of coming to the end of our lockdown conversation. A video is going to be shared. It will be tagged with all the other videos of the lockdown conversation. Please feel free to forward it around, pass it on, have a look, and we'll keep you informed about the next one. Thank you so much, Anjali.
Thank you, Ravindra. Thank you for actually asking. When you had asked me, I honestly didn't know where these conversations were going to go, and I just love the fact that we were able to steer it towards areas that were interesting for everybody who was involved in it. I do sit on, sit on shoulders of giants actually. So I think there's a lot that I have learned over my time, and as I said, those are my students. So, yes, thank you for having me in
No,
this.
thank you. There are a number of comments, and in the chat box, everybody is very grateful to you. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
ma'am. Thank you very much, Mrs. Carpe. Obviously, a lot of your ex-students there. Um, well, um,
Yeah,
genuinely, thank you so much.
thank you again.
So
Thank you.
stay safe, stay well, till we meet again, everyone. Bye bye.